All right, buckle up, everybody, because we are going way back today. We're diving deep into the resurgence of 90s and 2000s trends.
Oh, yeah.
We're basing this deep dive on a podcast episode called Nostalgia Trends, Why the 90s and 2000s Keep Coming Back. And I gotta say, just getting ready for this has me like blasting Britney and digging out all my old butterfly clips.
Yeah.
Is anyone else suddenly wanting to raid their mom's closet for some vintage denim?
It's definitely more than just a fad, though.
Oh, for sure.
Like, this hardcore nostalgia for those decades,
Yeah,
it actually says a lot about where we are as a culture right now.
totally.
What does this resurgence tell us about NW? That's the thing I find really interesting.
Right. The podcast we're looking at goes straight into like the psychology behind it all.
Okay.
Experts are saying that nostalgia, especially when things are changing or stressful, can be super comforting.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? Like when everything feels chaotic, you crave the familiar. It's like putting on that old t-shirt you've had since high school, instant comfort.
Except the 90s and 2000s weren't exactly stress-free either when you think about it.
That's true.
Like, you had the dot-com bubble bursting, 9/11, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
So much going on.
Yeah.
But maybe compared to today with, like, the constant information overload and all the global anxieties, those decades just felt a bit simpler.
Right.
A bit more defined, you know?
Yeah, like maybe we're romanticizing a sense of stability or just like a slower pace of change. It makes you wonder what parts of those times are people finding especially comforting in NW,
Yeah,
like in the face of whatever challenges they're dealing with personally.
totally.
Okay, let's talk fashion because this is where things get really wild.
Oh, yeah.
Y2K is BPCK, and I mean full force. Low-rise jeans, baguette bags, metallics everywhere.
Oh,
It's like someone opened a time capsule on the runway. Like, even high-end brands like Prada and Diesel are into it. And we're seeing vintage Juicy Couture and Ed Hardy come back.
seriously?
I know. Okay, I'll admit, I was all about the whole minimalist thing these past few years. But even I got a laugh at how those styles that everyone used to make fun of are suddenly considered cool again.
Right.
Is it just like how fashion always comes back around, or is there something more to it this time?
Well, fashion always reflects what's happening in culture, right?
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now is a total shift away from those sleek, simple looks that were so popular lately. This Y2K thing could be a reaction to that.
Oh, interesting.
Like, people are craving something bolder, more playful, even a little bit rebellious.
I see.
It makes you wonder what it says about our tastes and anxieties now, even.
What about you? Are you drawn to any of these trends?
Maybe.
Maybe secretly rocking a sparkly butterfly clip under that sophisticated blazer?
You never know. Let's move on to music.
Okay.
The podcast talked about how the 90s and early 2000s are having a huge comeback in music, too.
For sure.
Especially emo and pop punk. Bands like Blink-182 and Paramore are back on tour, selling out arenas.
It's crazy. I've seen so many videos online of people just, like, losing it at those shows.
I bet.
Like, they're teenagers, again, reliving those first heartbreaks with the soundtrack of their youth. But it's not just us older folks, right?
Right.
New artists like Olivia Rodrigo are totally channeling that sound, and Gen Z loves it.
It's true. Music taps into something really deep and emotional.
Yeah.
And that rawness, that angst of emo and pop punk,
Yeah.
it totally makes sense why it would resonate with people NRW, you know, with all the uncertainty and pressure they're facing.
It's like this universal language of feeling lost, misunderstood, and maybe a little bit angry at the world. And there's something comforting about knowing those feelings are timeless, that you're not alone in experiencing them. So we've talked fashion, music. Now let's look at how nostalgia is taking over TV.
Okay.
It seems like every streaming platform is putting out reboots of 90s and 2000s shows.
Yeah.
That 90s show, The New Gossip Girl, that Saved by the Bell reboot, it's endless.
Wow.
It's like they're betting on our desire to escape back to a time when things felt simpler, you know, less complicated. But do you think these reboots are just about cashing in on our nostalgia?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Or can they offer something more? I mean, they're updating these stories for a whole new generation.
That's where it gets really interesting. These reboots can be more than just nostalgia plays.
Great.
They give us this chance to look at those old stories and themes again, but through a modern lens. It
Yes.
really makes you think, what are they saying about how we see the past and how it connects to the present?
Yeah.
Like, what resonates with audiences and MAW that maybe didn't back then?
Right.
Or vice versa. It's a cool way to look at it. And it's really cool to think about how these reboots kind of act as a bridge between generations.
Oh, totally.
Like, picture a parent who grew up watching the original Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
And now they're watching the reboot with their kids.
Right.
It sparks all these conversations.
Sure.
A way to connect over those same characters and stories, but
Yeah.
also, acknowledge how times have changed.
It's like a built-in conversation starter, right? A way to talk about social issues or values, all those things that have shifted since the original show was on.
Exactly.
And it's not just TV reboots either.
Right.
Movies, music, video games, like everything old is new again.
Yeah.
And it's creating these like unexpected connections across age groups.
Those remastered video games are a great example.
Oh, for sure.
You've got a whole new generation getting introduced to classics like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater or Final Fantasy. Games that might have been totally forgotten are now being played through a modern lens.
That's true.
I think there's something really special about that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like opening a time capsule and getting to share those experiences
right.
with people who weren't even born when they came out.
It's amazing. And who knows, maybe it'll even like spark an appreciation for those old pixelated graphics and the like simpler gameplay.
Yeah.
Sometimes stripping away all the bells and whistles is refreshing,
Totally. Speaking of stripping things back,
Okay.
let's get back to that Y2K fashion revival for a sec.
Yes.
We touched on it before,
Right.
but it's a perfect example of how nostalgia can influence our style choices.
For sure.
And maybe even like something deeper.
Okay. I'll admit it, I was totally skeptical at first.
Yeah.
Low-rise jeans and crop tops coming back.
Right.
Really.
Right.
But I gotta say, there's something like fun and liberating about it.
Yeah.
It's like fashion is giving us permission to be a little more daring,
Mm-hmm.
a little more playful with the way we
Yeah.
express ourselves.
Exactly. It's not about like copying those trends exactly.
Right.
It's about, reinterpreting them for now, taking inspiration from the past and making it relevant to today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the magic happens, I think.
It's like taking those vintage pieces
Yeah.
and mixing them with modern silhouettes or accessories,
Right.
creating a look that's both nostalgic and fresh.
Totally. And it's not just about the clothes themselves either.
Right now.
It's about the attitude, the energy that those eras represent. Like the 90s were all about grunge and rebellion.
Right.
And the early 2000s had that like super vibrant pop culture energy.
Totally.
And I think those vibes are really speaking to people today, especially in a world that can feel, over-curated and way too polished.
Like there's this yearning for authenticity, for something real. And that feeling goes way beyond just fashion and entertainment too.
Oh, for sure.
Think about the popularity of like vintage furniture, the comeback of vinyl records, even the growing interest in analog photography.
Right. It's like we're craving a connection to tangible things, things that feel less digital, less mediated.
Right.
There's this growing awareness of like all the downsides of our hyper-connected world.
For sure.
And maybe this nostalgia for simpler times is a way of pushing back against that.
Like, remember when we used to actually talk on the phone?
Yeah.
Instead of just texting all the time?
Right.
Or when we sent handwritten letters instead of emails?
Totally.
There was something special about those slower, more intentional ways of communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if, like, deep down, we're kind of craving that again.
I think you've hit on something really important.
Oh.
Maybe this whole nostalgia wave isn't just about like missing the past. It's about really thinking about our relationship with technology.
With communication with each other.
I see.
It's about finding a more balanced, more meaningful way of being in the world.
That's a really powerful thought. But let's be real.
Okay.
There's another side to this whole nostalgia thing that we can't ignore.
What's that?
The commercialization of it all. Like, brands have totally caught on to our love for the past.
Oh, yeah.
And they're using it to sell us everything. Clothes, cars, cereal, you name it.
They're smart.
Yeah.
It's a super effective marketing strategy.
For sure.
And it's everywhere you look.
It's true.
But it brings up some important questions, too,
Oh, yeah. Like what?
about authenticity and intention.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when is nostalgia genuine?
Yeah.
And when is it just being manufactured to, like, manipulate us?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Totally.
I mean, sometimes it's fun to see brands embracing those retro vibes.
Yeah.
Like when a company brings back a product you loved as a kid, it can feel like a little gift,
Right.
a nod to your own history.
But there's a fine line between that genuine appreciation and just like cynical exploitation.
Absolutely. And as consumers, we need to be aware of that line.
So true.
We need to ask ourselves, is this brand really connecting with the spirit of that era?
Yeah.
Or are they just trying to cash in on our sentimental feelings?
So how can we tell the difference? What are some like red flags to watch out for?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is when a brand just slaps a retro logo on something without any real understanding of that era.
Yeah.
It just feels superficial, like a cheap attempt to jump on a trend.
It's like they're saying, hey, remember this thing you loved? Buy it again.
Exactly.
Even though it has nothing to do with who they are as a brand now.
Right. Another red flag is when a brand, like, romanticizes the past way too much. Ignores all the complexities and challenges of those times.
Right.
It's a form of selective memory that can be, misleading or even harmful.
It's like they're selling us this, like, perfect, airbrushed version of history that never actually existed.
Exactly.
And that can be dangerous, especially when it comes to social or political issues.
You're right. It's so important to remember that the past wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
It had its own problems and injustices.
For sure.
Nostalgia can be a really powerful tool for connection and reflection, but we have to engage with it critically. Acknowledge both the good and the bad.
It's about taking a balanced approach, right?
Totally.
Recognizing how far we've come, but also learning from those past mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, this whole nostalgia wave is pushing us to do exactly that.
I like that. Maybe it's a reminder that we're always evolving, always changing, always becoming.
I love that.
And the past, while it can teach us things and inspire us, doesn't have to define us.
That's a great point. So as we head into the final part of this deep dive, I'm curious to explore what all of this means for the future.
Okay.
If nostalgia is this powerful, how can we use it in a way that's, like, meaningful and productive?
That's a great question.
All right, we're back for the final part of our nostalgia journey. We've talked about so much already, from the psychology of it all to those crazy fashion trends and reboots, even how brands are using nostalgia to, like, play on our emotions.
It's true. Now it's time to, connect all the dots.
Okay. Yeah.
We've explored how W nostalgia shows up, but the big question is, what does this pull toward the 90s and 2000s really tell us about us as people and as a society? What's the takeaway?
Okay, I'm ready for that. So we talked about how those decades, there were times of big change too, just like now. Maybe it's not just about, like, missing specific things. Maybe it's about, like, longing for a time when we felt more in control, even if it wasn't really true.
Yeah, like we're looking for a map in the past, even if that map leads to a place that never really existed.
I like that.
We're drawn to the familiar, the comfortable, even if it's a little idealized. And that desire for stability, it says a lot about what we're anxious about today.
It's like saying, hey, world, slow down for a minute. I need to catch my breath.
Exactly.
But it's more than just wanting simpler times, right?
Right.
We talked about how nostalgia can be so powerful for connecting with people, especially across generations.
You got it. A song, a movie, a fashion trend, these can all become shared touchstones that bridge the gap between age groups.
Yeah.
It's like a secret handshake saying, hey, I get you. I was there too. Or, I wish I was there.
Right.
It creates common ground, especially when the world feels so divided sometimes.
And that connection can be so powerful. Nostalgia reminds us we have more in common than we think.
Exactly. It's a collective remember when that brings people together.
I love that. Okay, so here's something I've been wondering.
Yeah.
The things we choose to be nostalgic for, those specific things from those decades that we, like, lash onto. Doesn't that say a lot about what we value and what we want?
Absolutely. It's like holding up a mirror to, our collective psyche.
Okay, so give me an example. How does that work with the trends we're seeing?
Well, think about the comeback of 90s grunge and alternative culture.
Okay.
It's not just about the music or the ripped jeans.
Right.
It's the attitude, the rejection of, mainstream consumerism.
I see.
It points to a desire for something real, something authentic in a world that often feels fake and over-curated.
Like we're over all the filters and perfect Instagram feeds, we want something raw with an edge.
Exactly. And then you have the Y2K revival with its bright colors, bold looks, and that playful energy. It's like
Yeah.
pushing back against all the minimalism and restraint we've seen lately.
I see what you mean.
Maybe we're craving more joy, more self-expression, more fun in our lives.
Yeah, like saying it's okay to be bold, to stand out, to be yourself.
Exactly.
And it's interesting how that desire for self-expression, it goes beyond just fashion. Like we talked about that fascination with retro gadgets, old computers, even the look of early internet culture.
It is kind of a paradox, isn't it? We're surrounded by such advanced technology,
Yeah.
but we romanticize those clunky old devices and pixelated graphics.
Maybe it's because those older technologies, they felt more like tools, less like they were art of us. We had more control, more choice in how we use them.
That's a really insightful point. Maybe this nostalgia for simpler tech reflects that we're becoming aware of the downsides of our hyper-connected world,
Right.
the always-on digital world. We're starting to see the need for boundaries, for balance.
And maybe this whole nostalgia wave is a way to reclaim that balance.
It could be.
It's not about rejecting progress, but about learning from the past and like bringing those lessons into our lives now.
Totally. It's about realizing that progress isn't always a straight line.
Right.
Sometimes we take detours, make mistakes, and need to course correct.
Yeah.
And nostalgia can help us do that.
Like it's holding up the past as a mirror, showing us what we might have lost sight of along the way.
I like that.
Things like authenticity, connection, being intentional. Those are timeless values. And maybe we need to like re-embrace them in our modern world.
It all comes back to that, I think. And that brings us to the core of what we've been talking about today.
Oh.
Nostalgia isn't just about remembering the good old days. It's about using those memories to shape our present and future.
So it's not about getting stuck in the past,
Yeah.
but about using it as a way to grow and change.
Exactly. It's about asking ourselves, what can we learn from those times? What do we want to keep? And what do we want to leave behind?
That's a great question. It makes me wonder, what will people be nostalgic for 20 years from now?
Oh, that's a good one.
What parts of our culture today will they, like, romanticize?
Who knows? Maybe they'll look back at this time as a period of, like, waking up.
Oh, interesting.
A time when we started to question things and rethink our relationship with technology, with consumerism.
Maybe they'll miss that authenticity and connection we're all searching for now. Or maybe they'll laugh at our clothes. Who knows?
Haha, right. Only time will tell.
But one thing's for sure, nostalgia is a powerful force, and it's here to stay.
It's true.
It's up to us to use it wisely, to think critically, and to create a future that's meaningful and fulfilling.
I love that. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into 90s and 2000s nostalgia.
It's been a fun one.
We encourage everyone listening to keep exploring their own connection to the past.
Yeah, what are you nostalgic for?
What does it tell you about yourself?
And how can you use those insights to shape your life now and in the future?
This has been The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time for another exciting exploration. Until then, keep those nostalgic flames burning, but burn them wisely.